Begin. The wind howled like a hungry wolf outside Silas's small cabin, pushing against the rough-hewn logs. He was a man of few words, preferring the company of his horses and the wide, open sky to noisy towns. His hands, strong and calloused from years of ranch work, smoothed the thick wool blanket over his cot. It was already colder than a well-digger's boot, and the first flakes of snow had begun to swirl just hours ago. Now, a full-blown blizzard was upon them, blanketing the corrals in a thick, white quilt. Silas poked at the fire in the stone hearth, watching the orange flames dance. The only sounds were the crackle of burning wood and the relentless shriek of the wind. He liked the quiet. It suited him. He'd spent most of his life alone, working the land, fixing fences, and tending to the cattle. People didn't bother him, and he didn't bother them. His world was simple, predictable, and wrapped in the comforting scent of pine smoke and damp earth. Outside, the snow piled higher against the cabin walls, burying the windows in soft, cold drifts. The world beyond his four walls was disappearing under a blanket of white. Soon, the path to the main ranch house would be impossible, and even the closest town would be days away, if at all. He pulled his heavy wool coat tighter around him, feeling its familiar scratch against his chin. He was ready for the storm. He always was. He had enough dried meat, enough firewood, and enough solitude to last him until spring. Nothing could break the quiet of his winter retreat. Or so he thought. End. Begin. Silas was settling into his usual evening rhythm, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls, when a faint thud broke through the blizzard's roar. He paused, listening. It came again, a softer, more desperate sound, like something collapsing against his cabin door. His brow furrowed. No animal would be out in this, and no person would willingly brave such a storm. He grabbed his lantern, its dim light swaying as he moved towards the door. His hand hesitated on the latch, a flicker of his solitary nature warring with a deep-seated instinct to help. He pushed the heavy wooden door open a crack, and a blast of icy wind rushed in, carrying with it a swirl of snow. Lying crumpled against the threshold, half buried in a fresh drift, was a figure, a small one. Silas quickly pulled the door wide. It was a woman, her face pale and streaked with dirt, her clothes thin and torn. Her eyes were closed, and a thin layer of frost dusted her eyelashes. She looked like a ghost or a snow angel fallen from the sky. Without a second thought, Silas knelt, his strong hands gently lifting her. She was light, almost weightless, and cold as ice. The wool of his own shirt felt warm against her icy skin as he carried her inside. He laid her carefully by the fire, the heat immediately beginning to warm the small space. He grabbed a thick, scratchy wool blanket from his cot, the one he had just smoothed, and wrapped it tightly around her. He then poured some warm water into a tin cup and, with great care, tried to get her to sip it. His usual silence was replaced by a quiet urgency, his solitary world momentarily forgotten. The only sound was the woman's shallow, ragged breathing and the continuing shriek of the storm. End. Begin. It took a full day for the woman to stir, her eyes fluttering open to the dim light of Silas's cabin. He offered her more warm water, then a bowl of thick stew, which she ate slowly, weakly. Her name, she whispered, was Alara. She didn't say where she came from or why she was out in such a storm, and Silas didn't ask. His kindness was enough. The blizzard raged for days, trapping them in the small cabin. Outside, the world was a blur of white, the wind a constant, mournful song. Inside, a quiet rhythm settled between Silas and Alara. He continued his chores, checking on the horses in the barn, clearing snow from the door, always returning to the warmth of the fire. Alara, still weak, would watch him, sometimes helping with simple tasks like stirring the stew or folding the wool blankets. Words were few, but glances spoke volumes. Silas found himself watching her, a strange feeling blooming in his chest. He noticed the way her fingers traced the rough texture of the wool, the way her eyes, a deep shade of brown, would sometimes hold a faraway look. Alara, in turn, seemed to understand his silent ways. She didn't push him to talk, and he didn't feel the need to explain himself. They simply existed, two souls sheltered from the storm, sharing the small space. The mechanical clicks of the fire settling, the soft rustle of their movements, filled the silence. The wool blankets, once just a comfort from the cold, now felt like a shared cocoon, binding them in an unspoken understanding. It was a strange kind of peace, one Silas had never known, and he found himself not wanting it to end. Begin. After what felt like an age, the wind began to die down. The snow, once a furious torrent, softened to a gentle fall, then stopped altogether. The world outside Silas's cabin was a breathtaking expanse of untouched white, sparkling under a pale sun. It was beautiful, but it meant Alara would leave. She stood by the door, her meager belongings gathered in a small bundle. Her face was clearer now, the shadows of hunger and cold gone, replaced by a quiet sadness that mirrored Silas's own. He stood a few feet away, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his wool trousers. There were no words needed, no long farewells. They had shared a silence that was deeper than any conversation. Alara turned, her eyes meeting his. A soft, sad smile touched her lips. "Thank you, Silas," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the crunch of snow under her boots as she stepped outside. He watched her walk away, a small figure against the vast, white landscape, until she disappeared behind the snowy rise. The cabin felt emptier than it ever had before. The fire still crackled, the mechanical clicks of the settling wood still echoed, but the warmth Alara had brought, the unspoken connection, was gone. Silas returned to his routine, feeding the horses, mending fences, but everything felt different. The quiet he once cherished now felt heavy, a burden. The wool of his blanket, once a symbol of comfort, now felt like a reminder of absence. He was back to being a loner, but the solitude was no longer peaceful. A small part of his heart had been touched by kindness, and it had left a mark, a silent ache that whispered of what could have been. He was forever changed. Begin. Years passed. The ache in Silas's heart never truly faded, but life on the ranch went on. He mended fences, tended to the cattle, and watched the seasons turn. The valley grew, slowly but surely. More families moved in, more ranches sprung up, and with them, the need for faster ways to talk to the outside world. One dusty summer, a new building appeared in the small town, right next to the general store. It was smaller than most, with a single wire stretching from its roof, disappearing into the distance. A sign above the door, newly painted, read, "Telegraph Office." At first, Silas paid it little mind. He had no need for quick messages. His world was here, on the ranch. But soon, a new sound began to weave its way into the valley's daily rhythm. A quick, sharp clicking. Click-clack, click-clack, click. It was the telegraph machine, sending its coded messages across the land. It became a familiar backdrop to the sounds of horses, wind, and distant cowbells. Sometimes, when he rode into town for supplies, Silas would pause near the office, drawn by the rhythmic mechanical clicks. He'd watch folks come and go, their faces eager with news from faraway places. He never went inside. It wasn't his place. He preferred the quiet hum of his own thoughts, the feel of his worn wool shirt against his skin. But the sound, that insistent, quick clicking, sometimes reminded him of something he couldn't quite place, a memory just out of reach. It was a new age for the valley, and even Silas, set in his ways, felt the subtle shift in the air, a hint of connection to a world he usually kept at arm's length. Begin. One chilly autumn day, Silas found himself with a rare errand in town. The general store was out of a specific kind of wool yarn he used to mend his blankets, and he had to place an order. The storekeeper, a garrulous fellow named Old Man Hemlock, suggested he send a telegraph. Faster than a horse, Silas, and surer than a letter, he chuckled. Silas grumbled but agreed. He found himself walking towards the small building, the insistent clicking sound louder now that he was approaching it with purpose. He pushed open the door, a small bell tinkling above his head. The air inside smelled of dust and something metallic. A young woman sat hunched over the telegraph machine, her fingers flying across the key, a rapid-fire series of mechanical clicks filling the room. Silas approached the counter, his eyes falling on her hands first. They were quick, nimble, yet strong, moving with a practiced ease. Something about them, a faint scar near the thumb, a way her wrist bent, it was oddly familiar. He cleared his throat. The clicking stopped. The woman looked up, and Silas's breath caught in his throat. Her eyes, a deep, warm brown, met his. It was Alara. Older, yes, her face a little leaner, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, but unmistakably Alara. The years melted away, and he saw the same quiet strength he remembered from the blizzard. She looked at him, her expression shifting from polite inquiry to dawning recognition, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. The silence in the room, now devoid of the telegraph's rapid rhythm, was heavy with unspoken memories. Silas, the man of few words, could only stare, a tremor running through his calloused hands. End. Begin. The shared silence between Silas and Alara stretched, filled only by the distant sounds of the town. Just as Silas was about to finally speak, the telegraph machine behind Alara suddenly sprang to life. Its clicking was different this time, not the steady rhythm he had become used to, but a frantic, urgent stutter. Alara's eyes, still wide from seeing Silas, snapped to the machine. Her fingers, which had just moments ago been still, flew to the key, ready to receive. Her face, which had held a soft warmth, grew tight with concentration. The clicking intensified, a rapid-fire burst of sound, each mechanical beat a word, a warning. Silas watched, fascinated, as her eyes scanned the paper tape that fed out of the machine. The rapid dit-da-dit-dit-da filled the small room, a language only she understood. Then, as quickly as it began, the message ended. Alara snatched the paper, her breath catching. Her face drained of color, leaving her pale as the snow that had once covered her. She looked up at Silas, her brown eyes wide with fear and urgency. "Raiders," she breathed, her voice a strained whisper. "A large posse, heading this way. They're only a day or two out." The words hung in the air, cold and stark. Silas felt a chill colder than any blizzard. Raiders meant trouble, ruin, danger for everyone in the valley. His gaze went from Alara's frightened face to the silent telegraph machine, then back to her. The years of quiet ranch life, the solitude he had embraced, seemed flimsy against this sudden, terrifying news. The quiet of the office was shattered by the terrible truth that had just clicked its way across the wires, threatening to rewrite the destiny of the entire valley. End. Begin. Alara didn't waste a second. Her fear quickly turned into a fierce determination. She spun back to the telegraph machine, her fingers already hovering over the key. "We have to warn everyone," she said, her voice sharp and clear despite the tremor in her hands. "Every ranch, every family. They need time to prepare." Silas watched, mesmerized as she began to work. Her fingers were a blur, dancing across the brass key. Click, click, clack, click, clack. The mechanical sounds filled the small office, not frantic now, but purposeful, each burst of code a vital piece of information. She sent out the warning to the main ranch house, then to the outlying homesteads, her mind racing through the list of connections, her memory perfect. She wasn't just sending dots and dashes. She was sending hope, giving people a chance. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, her lips moving silently as she translated the urgent message into the precise language of Morse code. The rhythm of her work was hypnotic, a testament to her skill and dedication. Silas had never seen anything like it. The years she had spent away, the experiences she must have had shaped her into this quick-thinking, vital woman. The very skill that had brought her back to the valley, the quick code work she possessed, was now their only chance. He could almost feel the warnings traveling along the wires, across the vast distances, bringing news of danger to isolated homes. He imagined the ranchers, receiving the sudden, sharp clicks of their own telegraphs, the confusion turning to alarm, then action. Alara's rapid-fire messages were painting a picture of peril, but also offering the precious gift of time. The wool texture of his shirt felt rough against his skin, a grounding sensation as the world around them suddenly seemed to speed up, propelled by the urgent, mechanical heart of the telegraph machine. End. Begin. News of the raiders spread like wildfire through the valley, carried not by rider, but by the rapid, mechanical clicks of Alara's telegraph. Families who had been going about their daily lives suddenly sprang into action. Ranchers secured their livestock, moving them into fortified corrals. Women gathered children and supplies, preparing to shelter in the safest places. Men sharpened axes and loaded rifles, their faces grim but determined. The valley, usually a scattering of isolated homesteads, now worked as one, united by the shared threat and the clear warning they had received. Silas, after leaving the telegraph office, rode hard back to his own ranch. He secured his cabin, checked his rifle, and then rode to the nearest neighboring ranch to offer his help. He saw the preparations, the hurried, efficient movements, the focused faces. There was no panic, only a grim resolve, all thanks to Alara's timely message. As he worked alongside his neighbors, barricading gates and scouting the trails, Silas couldn't help but think of Alara. He pictured her back in the small office, her nimble fingers still clicking out warnings, her eyes scanning for any new information. He realized, with a clarity that settled deep in his bones, that her return to the valley wasn't just a coincidence. It was destiny. The quiet girl he had sheltered years ago, the one who had left him with an aching heart, had come back with a vital skill, one that was now saving them all. Her presence, her quick wit, and her ability to speak the language of the wires had turned what could have been a disaster into a chance for survival. The simple act of kindness he had shown her during that blizzard had somehow, impossibly, come back to protect his entire world. The thought filled him with a quiet awe. End. Begin. The raiders arrived 2 days later, a dust cloud on the horizon quickly resolving into a grim, armed band. But they found no easy targets. Instead, every ranch was ready. Fences were reinforced, windows barred, and men stood guard, rifles at the ready. The element of surprise, their greatest weapon, was gone. After a few skirmishes, met with determined resistance, and finding no easy pickings, the raiders, frustrated and outmaneuvered, turned tail and rode away, leaving the valley untouched save for a few broken fences and ruffled nerves. A collective sigh of relief swept through the valley. The immediate danger had passed. Soon after, a celebration erupted, a joyous gathering at the town square, a release of tension and a testament to their unity. There was much handshaking, back-patting, and stories shared of narrow escapes and brave stands. Amidst the cheers, a quiet reverence settled as the town mayor, a man named Mr. Abernathy, called for attention. He spoke of the miracle that had saved them, of the quick thinking that had given them the time to prepare. He pointed to Alara, standing a little shyly by her telegraph office door, her face flushed with modesty. It was Alara, he boomed, and her magic machine, that warned us all. Cheers rose for her, loud and heartfelt. Then, Mr. Abernathy looked toward Silas, who stood near the edge of the crowd, his wool coat making him blend into the shadows. And let us not forget the quiet kindness that brought her here and kept her safe all those years ago. A kindness that has now, truly, saved us all. Silas felt the warmth of appreciative glances, not just for his small role in the defense, but for the act of mercy that had set everything in motion. The community understood. They saw Alara's bravery, and they recognized Silas's quiet, powerful act of humanity. End. Begin. As the mayor finished speaking, the crowd turned their appreciative gazes from Alara to Silas. He met their eyes for a moment. Then his gaze drifted to Alara. She was still by the telegraph office door, a faint smile on her lips, her brown eyes seeking his. Their eyes met across the square, and in that shared glance, a world of understanding passed between them. No word were needed. The years, the blizzard, the quiet shared meals, the ache of her departure, the surprise of her return, the frantic clicks of a telegraph key, the looming threat, and the hard-won victory, it all shimmered in that single, silent connection. They both knew. They understood that the simple act of Silas opening his cabin door on that freezing night had not just saved Alara, but it set in motion a chain of events that saved an entire valley. Alara's smile softened, a warmth spreading through her eyes that Silas remembered from those days in the cabin. He saw the recognition there, the acknowledgement of a debt repaid, not in coins, but in the lives of many. He, in turn, saw the brave, skilled woman she had become, a woman who could stand tall in the face of danger and use her unique talent to protect her home. The rough wool of his coat felt comforting, a familiar texture in a world that had suddenly become very different, very connected. The mechanical clicks of the telegraph, now silent, felt like a memory of their shared struggle and triumph. It was a quiet miracle, born from a moment of mercy. And as they held each other's gaze, they knew their destinies had become woven together, as tightly as the threads of a good wool blanket, all because of a blizzard and a kind heart. Begin. In the days that followed the raiders' retreat, the valley slowly returned to its peaceful rhythm, but it was a peace made stronger by unity and gratitude. Silas no longer felt the heavy burden of his solitude. He found himself drawn to the telegraph office, not for messages, but for the quiet company of Alara. He'd bring her fresh water from his well, or a piece of pie baked by a grateful neighbor. Sometimes he'd just sit, listening to the soft, rhythmic clicks of her work, a sound that no longer felt foreign but comforting, a part of her, a part of their shared life. Alara, in turn, often found reasons to visit Silas's ranch. She helped him mend a torn wool blanket with nimble fingers, her touch gentle as she smoothed the rough fabric. She'd bring him news from town, small stories that brightened his quiet days. The snow-banked corrals, once a symbol of his isolation, now seemed to invite her presence, her footsteps leaving tracks beside his in the morning frost. Their bond deepened, built on unspoken understanding and shared history. The act of mercy that had brought them together had indeed rewritten their destinies. Silas, the loner, found himself with a companion, a partner who understood his quiet ways and valued his steadfast nature. Alara, the runaway, had found a home, a purpose, and a man whose kindness had not only saved her, but had also given her the chance to save an entire community. The valley thrived, safe and connected, its people forever grateful for the telegraph operator's quick code work and the ranch hand's simple, powerful act of humanity. And in the heart of it all, Silas and Alara, no longer alone, found a quiet happiness together, their lives intertwined, a testament to how one small act of kindness could change everything.